All right, let's jump into another deep dive. And today we're looking at the disappearance and murder of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey. It's a tough one for sure, but listeners have sent in so much on this one. It's a big stack of articles, interviews, court documents, the whole works.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been looking through it too, and what really stands out is how much we learn about the family, about Tristan herself. It's not just about the crime; it's about the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of the family, the Bailey family, their dynamic is really unique. They call themselves the Bailey Seven Parents Forest, and Stacy, Tristan, and four older siblings. It seems like they moved around a lot, which, probably brought them super close.
Yeah, you can imagine moving that often. It's like having this built-in support system, right?
Yeah.
But it's also got to be incredibly intense to have to adjust to new places, new people, over and over.
I mean, think about how that constant uprooting might have shaped their response to something as traumatic as this, the strength they had to find.
Yeah, exactly. As individuals, but as a unit, as a family.
So Tristan was the youngest of five. A real spitfire from what I've read.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They say she had this really distinctive laugh, almost like a screech. She's been doing it since she was a baby. Apparently she loved cheerleading, had big dreams, and even at 13 you could tell she knew who she was.
That's a point that often gets missed. This
Yeah.
wasn't a troubled teen running away.
Yeah.
She had a strong sense of self, ambitions. The fact that she disappeared so suddenly and so out of character, right, that immediately raises the stakes.
Yeah. So the story starts on Mother's Day 2021 in St. John's, Florida. Picture a safe, quiet, almost picture-perfect community. The kind of place where you wouldn't expect something like this to happen. The Bailey family's getting ready to surprise their mom with breakfast, but Tristan's nowhere to be found.
Past 9 a.m., which is already, unusual.
Yeah.
Then they try her phone, and it goes straight to voicemail. It's not until 20 minutes later that they even call the
Yeah,
police.
that urgency, right? That speaks volumes.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that feeling. The feeling in that house, Tristan's dad, Forrest, starts searching the neighborhood frantically. But the police ask him to stay home.
It seems counterintuitive, but it's standard procedure. They need to secure the home, right, in case it's a crime scene, preserve any potential evidence, and make sure Forrest doesn't accidentally interfere with the investigation.
It's a race against time, and they're doing everything they can. Working with the police, posting on social media, contacting all of Kristen's friends, just searching for answers.
And that's where we see social media's double-edged sword, right? On one hand, it's an incredible tool for spreading information, maybe reaching someone who saw something.
Huh.
But on the other hand, there's the risk of misinformation. Rumors, speculation, it just adds more chaos to an already unbearable situation.
And they discover that Tristan snuck out the night before to hang out at a friend's house.
Friend named Trey.
Trey, right? And he initially lies to the police, says she wasn't there.
Teenage brain, not fully developed, especially under pressure. You add in fear, loyalty, not wanting to get in trouble. Even innocent teens might make irrational choices. In this case, Trey was grounded and terrified of his parents finding out.
So Tristan was at Trey's house, but there was another kid there too, right? Aiden Fucci?
Yeah, Aiden admits to walking Tristan partway home around 1 a.m., but then claims they had a fight and he left her alone. But think about it. Why lie to the police in the first place? And why would Tristan, with her personality, be touching Aiden inappropriately, as he claims? It just doesn't add up.
Well, the family's clinging to hope, waiting for any news. Social media is blowing up. Tips are pouring in, but also a lot of false leads. Tristan's sister, Brittany, she's on her honeymoon in Las Vegas. Imagine that, trying to help from thousands of miles away, feeling totally helpless.
It's a nightmare. You can't wake up waiting, clinging to fragments of information, your mind racing with the worst-case scenarios.
And then we have Jennifer Dutton, the prosecutor. She actually sees the news and calls the police to offer her help.
Here's where you see the legal system working with law enforcement, and it's so important. Having that legal expertise from the get-go, ensuring evidence is collected properly, building the case strategically, anticipating the legal challenges down the line.
And then the news everyone was dreading. A neighbor, out for a run, discovers Tristan's body.
In a wooded area near a cul-de-sac.
And she'd been stabbed multiple times.
And the location's important, right? It's not hidden, it's near a residential street. Why wasn't she found sooner? How did her body go unnoticed for so long? Another layer of mystery.
And then things get really disturbing. While Aiden is being questioned at the police station, they find some Snapchat posts he made after Tristan disappeared. He's joking around, acting like he doesn't have a care in the world.
Think about that. Is it a 14-year-old trying to act tough to mask his fear? Or is it something more chilling? A genuine lack of empathy.
And of course, there were the initial lies to the police.
Right, the lies. The way his story kept changing, it makes him seem manipulative, untrustworthy. The prosecution argued that this wasn't a confused teen, this was someone trying to cover his tracks.
So the police are piecing together hours of surveillance footage from the neighborhood, and what they find changes everything.
He's almost Orwellian, isn't it? All those cameras. But in this case, that footage is crucial.
They find video of Aiden and Tristan walking together towards that cul-de-sac where her body was found, but only Aiden is seen leaving.
And his story falls apart. It puts him at the scene, contradicts his claims, damning evidence. But remember, even with this proof, this case is far from over.
So we end this part of the deep dive with a haunting question. What happened in those final moments with Aiden? What led him to do something so horrific? I mean, that video footage, just seeing him walk away alone, chilling. You'd think that would be it, right? Case closed. But I'm guessing it wasn't quite that simple.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Actually, this is where things get even more complicated. Even with that video, Aiden's trial was anything but straightforward.
So where do investigators even go from there? They have the video, but what else did they need?
Well, they had Aiden in custody, but not formally charged. They needed to build a rock-solid case, a clear motive, a timeline that made sense, and of course, forensic evidence.
What about the forensic evidence? What did that tell them about Tristan's death?
The autopsy was, well, difficult to say the least. It revealed that Tristan had been stabbed 114 times.
Oh my God.
Sheer brutality of it, especially coming from a 14-year-old.
It's just horrifying, 114 times. Did they ever find the weapon?
They did, and it linked directly back to Aiden. A hunting knife found discarded in a nearby pond belonged to Aiden's family, and DNA testing confirmed Tristan's blood on the blade.
So the murder weapon, the video footage, Aiden's own inconsistent statements, it seems like an airtight case at that point, right?
You would think so. But the legal system, it's rarely the black and white Aiden's defense team. They have their own strategy. And it was a controversial one. They were going to argue that Aiden was mentally disturbed, that he was influenced by violent video games, dark content online. They were painting a picture of a troubled teen not in control of his actions.
I've heard that argument before. Did they have any evidence to back it up?
They pointed to his online activity, his interest in true crime, some alleged mental health struggles. It's a tactic that can be effective, you know. It raises questions about responsibility versus influence. How much can we hold someone accountable when their brain is still developing?
It's a tough question. What about Aiden's behavior during the investigation? Did that offer any insights?
Well, those Snapchat posts, right?
Huh?
The ones he made while Tristan was still missing. Remember how flippant they were? The prosecution argued that this showed a lack of remorse, a disregard for human life.
And his initial lies, of course.
Exactly. The lies, the changing story. It created an image of someone manipulative, untrustworthy. The prosecution's point was that this wasn't some teen having a breakdown. This was calculated.
So with all that against him, why wasn't it a quick trial and conviction? What were the challenges?
Aiden's age was a major factor, and his defense team made a strategic move, a successful one. They got his case moved from adult court to juvenile court.
For those who aren't familiar with the legal system, can you break that down? What's the difference?
It's a huge difference. Juvenile courts focus on rehabilitation, not just punishment. They consider the developmental stage of the offender. So even if convicted of first-degree murder, Aiden would face a much lighter sentence in juvenile court.
Wow. I can imagine that was a tough pill to swallow for Tristan's family. To have the potential punishment lessened because of age, despite the brutality of the crime.
It raised some really complex questions, for sure, about accountability, rehabilitation, especially when dealing with a juvenile court. A question the justice system grapples with constantly, and there's no easy answer.
What about the public? This must have been a huge shock to the community.
This case, it captivated people across the country. You have this seemingly perfect community, a place where parents felt safe, and then this brutal act. It shattered that sense of security, a reminder that darkness can exist anywhere.
So, navigating this complex legal system, how did the Bailey family even begin to process this loss?
They were thrust into a nightmare, but they chose to channel their grief into action. They became advocates for Tristan's Law, legislation to strengthen penalties for violent juvenile offenders. They shared their story, seeking justice for Tristan, but also trying to prevent this from happening to another family.
Turning their pain into a force for change, it's incredibly powerful. Tell me about the trial itself. What was the outcome?
It was a long process, full of emotion, and in the end, Aiden Fucci actually pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. It was a sudden turn of events. It spared the Baileys a trial, but it also left many questions unanswered.
A plea deal? Why would he plead guilty when his defense seemed to be gaining traction?
Well, plea deals often involve concessions from the prosecution, maybe a reduced sentence or some charges dropped. It's a way to avoid the uncertainty of a trial, and it gives both sides some control over the outcome.
So even with a guilty plea, there's still this negotiation, a compromise within the system.
It's about trying to find a balance, even if it's imperfect, trying to reconcile the severity of the crime with the complexities of juvenile justice. We may never fully know Aiden's motivations, what was going on in his mind.
I mean, it's just frustrating, isn't it? We have all this information, all this evidence, these experts, but we're still left with these huge questions. Like, what was Aiden thinking? How can a 14-year-old even comprehend what he did, let alone actually do it?
It's the nature of these cases, right? We analyze, we theorize, we try to get inside their heads, but ultimately we're dealing with the human mind. And it's a mystery, especially the mind of a teenager. Still developing, still figuring things out.
It's like a puzzle with some pieces missing. You know the picture, but you'll never see the whole thing. So what happened to Aiden? What was his sentence?
Because of his age at the time, and the fact that he was tried as a juvenile. He was sentenced to life in prison, but with the possibility of review after 25 years.
Life, but with a chance of release. That must have been a tough sentence to hear for Tristan's family, for anyone who believes in strict accountability, no matter the age.
It definitely sparked a debate, didn't it? About how our justice system handles these cases. Especially when they're this brutal, it forces us to ask, is rehabilitation possible after something like this? What does justice even look like? For the family, for society, there are no easy answers.
What about Tristan's family? How have they been coping since her death? Have they continued their fight for change?
They have. They've shown incredible strength. They took their grief, their anger, and they turned it into something positive. They started the Tristan Bailey Foundation to support youth programs to promote mental health awareness. They're honoring her memory by trying to build a better future.
To prevent other families from going through the same thing, it's inspiring. What about Tristan's law? Any progress there?
They've been working tirelessly to get it passed. It would make it much harder for juveniles accused of violent crimes to be tried in juvenile court, to make sure the punishment fits the crime, no matter the age. It's gaining support, but it's a tough fight. It challenges the whole idea of our juvenile justice system, and people have strong opinions on both sides.
So we've gone through all this material. We've learned about Tristan, about her family, about this complex case. What's the takeaway? What do you hope sticks with our listeners?
I think it's a reminder that darkness can exist anywhere, even in the safest communities.
Yeah.
We have to be vigilant for ourselves and for each other, and trust our gut. If something feels wrong, if you see something off, don't be afraid to speak up.
It's also a story about resilience, about love, about finding the strength to create good out of tragedy. The Bailey family, they could have been consumed by their grief. But instead, they chose to fight for justice, for change, for a world where this doesn't happen again.
We've talked about evidence, about legal battles, about psychology, but at its heart, this is a story about a girl who was loved, who had dreams, whose life was cut short, and a family who refuses to let her be forgotten.
It's a story that makes you think, that stays with you. It makes you question, makes you appreciate, and hopefully inspires you to make a difference, even in small ways. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another story, but for now, take care and stay safe.